Thank you. I thought I was gone, he whispered, voice cracking like dry leaves. In the fading light of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Sarah, a single mother, and her daughter Lily stumble upon a chilling sight, a pale hand clawing from a shallow pit, veiled by tangled branches. Sarah's heart races as she sweeps aside brittle leaves, revealing a man, bloodied and barely alive, his fingers waving weakly for salvation. With fierce determination, she pulls him free, his cold hand gripping hers, a silent plea. Wrapping her jacket around his trembling frame, she vows to save him. Who buried this stranger? What betrayal led to this moment? Share where you're watching from and when in the comments below. Subscribe to join this journey. Will Sarah uncover his truth or unearth a darker secret? Predict the twist in 3 words. The Blue Ridge Mountains loomed like silent sentinels, their peaks cloaked in the amber glow of dusk. The trail, a jagged scar of dirt and stone, wound through dense pines, the air thick with the scent of sap and earth. Sarah's boots crunched against loose gravel, her breath steady but tight, as she and Lily half-carried, half-dragged the stranger they'd pulled from the earth. His weight pressed against her shoulder, his shallow breaths a faint rhythm against the wind's low howl. Lily, her small frame rigid with fear, clutched the man's other arm, her green eyes darting between her mother and the path ahead. The shed, their only refuge, lay a quarter-mile down the trail, its weathered silhouette barely visible through the thickening shadows. Sarah's muscles burned, but she pushed forward, driven by a mother's instinct sharpened by years of protecting Lily alone. The man's tattered jacket, once fine wool, now clung to him in muddy strips, and his shattered watch glinted faintly, a relic of a life left behind. "We're almost there," Sarah said, her voice a lifeline for both Lily and the stranger. She didn't know his name, but his grip on her hand, weak yet desperate, told her he was fighting to stay alive. Lily's small voice broke the silence. "Mom, is he okay?" Sarah glanced at her daughter, her pale face streaked with dirt, and forced a nod. "He will be, sweetheart. Just keep moving." The shed emerged from the dusk, a squat, rusted structure tucked beside a deserted campsite. Its wooden walls sagged under years of neglect, the door creaking as Sarah shouldered it open. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the smell of old rope and mildewed canvas. A sagging cot sat in one corner, surrounded by shelves of forgotten climbing gear, carabiners, frayed ropes, a dented lantern. Sarah eased the man onto the cot, his body slumping like a broken marionette. His face, pale and blood-streaked, bore the sharp angles of someone important, someone who didn't belong in a grave of leaves and dirt. "Lily, grab the first aid kit from my pack," Sarah said, her hands already moving to check his pulse. It was faint, erratic, but there. Lily scrambled to obey, her small hands fumbling with the backpack's zipper. She handed Sarah the worn red kit, her eyes wide with questions she didn't voice. Sarah tore open a gauze pad, pressing it to the gash on the man's forehead. Blood seeped through, staining her fingers, but she worked with steady precision, her years as a nurse's aide resurfacing like muscle memory. "Stay with me," she whispered, more to herself than to him. His chest rose and fell, each breath a fragile thread. She cleaned the wound, wincing at the raw abrasions circling his wrists, marks of restraints, not accidents. Someone had meant for him to die. The lantern flickered to life, casting jagged shadows across the shed's walls. Lily hovered nearby, clutching a water bottle, her braid fraying from the day's chaos. "Mom, why was he buried?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to shield Lily from the truth, but the girl's sharp gaze demanded honesty. "I don't know yet," Sarah admitted, wrapping a bandage around the man's arm. "But we're going to find out." She glanced at him, his features slack but hauntingly refined. High cheekbones, a jawline that spoke of boardrooms, not backwoods. His lips moved, a faint murmur escaping. "Clara, why?" Sarah leaned closer, her heart pounding. "Who's Clara?" she asked, but his eyes fluttered shut, his body surrendering to exhaustion. She sat back, her mind racing. The name carried weight, a shard of a larger story. She rummaged through her pack, pulling out a thermal blanket and draping it over him. His hand twitched, fingers curling as if reaching for something or someone lost. "Lily, stay close," Sarah said, her voice firm but gentle. The girl nodded, sitting cross-legged on the floor, her small hands clasped tightly. Outside, the wind rattled the shed's loose panels, a reminder of their isolation. Sarah's phone, useless without signal, lay abandoned in her pack. The nearest ranger station was miles away, and night was falling fast. She looked at the man, his breathing steadier now, and felt a strange resolve settle in her chest. She'd saved him from the earth, but saving him from whatever had put him there would be harder. "Mom," Lily whispered, her eyes fixed on the stranger. "He looks sad." Sarah nodded, brushing a strand of blonde hair from Lily's face. "Sometimes people carry heavy things even when they're asleep." The man stirred again, his voice a ragged whisper. "Ethan," he breathed, the name laced with longing. Sarah's heart clenched. Whoever Ethan was, he was the reason this man had clung to life. She adjusted the blanket, her fingers lingering on his cold hand. "We'll keep you safe," she promised, though she wasn't sure how. The shed, with its creaking walls and cluttered shadows, felt like a fragile fortress against the truth buried in that pit. Sarah looked at Lily, her daughter's small form a beacon of courage, and knew they'd stepped into something bigger than themselves. The mountains held secrets, and this man's story was one they'd have to unravel, together. The lantern's flickering glow danced across the shed's warped walls, casting long shadows that seemed to pulse with the stranger's shallow breaths. Sarah knelt beside the cot, her hands steady as she adjusted the bandage on his forehead, though her heart thrummed with questions. Lily sat nearby, her small frame curled against a pile of old ropes, her green eyes fixed on the man they'd pulled from the earth. His name, Ethan, still hung in the air, a whispered tether to a life he'd nearly lost. Sarah's fingers paused, her gaze tracing the raw marks on his wrists, evidence of a cruelty she couldn't yet fathom. The wind outside battered the shed, a restless howl that mirrored the storm brewing in her mind. She dipped a cloth into a tin of warm water, wiping the dried blood from his cheek. His face, though gaunt, held a refined strength, the kind forged in boardrooms, not battles. His eyes fluttered open, blue and clouded, but sharper now, as if clawing their way back from oblivion. "You saved me," he rasped, his voice like gravel. Sarah met his gaze, her own eyes steady despite the weight of his gratitude. "We couldn't leave you there," she said simply, handing Lily the cloth to rinse. The girl moved quickly, her small hands trembling but purposeful, as if she, too, felt the gravity of this moment. "I'm James," he said, each word a struggle. "James Carver." Sarah nodded, committing the name to memory. "I'm Sarah. This is my daughter, Lily." The girl offered a shy wave, her braid fraying from the day's ordeal. James's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile, but pain quickly reclaimed his expression. "Why were you in that pit, James?" Sarah asked, her voice soft but insistent. She needed answers, not just for him, but for the unease coiling in her gut. Whoever had done this might still be out there, watching. James's gaze drifted to the lantern, its light reflecting in his eyes like a distant fire. "Clara," he said, the name a bitter shard. "My wife. She and Marcus. They wanted everything." His voice cracked, and he turned his head as if the truth were too heavy to face. Sarah's breath caught. She'd known loss. Her husband's death had carved a hollow in her heart, but betrayal like this was a different kind of wound. "Who's Marcus?" she pressed, keeping her tone gentle, like coaxing a wounded animal. "My partner," James said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "CFO of MedConnect. We built it together. Apps to connect doctors with rural patients. I thought we were saving lives." He paused, his fingers twitching against the blanket. "But they wanted the money, the control. They planned it. A hiking trip. Said it was for my birthday." His laugh was hollow, bitter. "They led me up that trail, and Marcus, he hit me. I woke up in that hole, buried under leaves, my hands tied." His eyes met Sarah's, raw with shame and fury. "They thought I was dead." Lily gasped, her small hand flying to her mouth. Sarah reached for her, squeezing her shoulder, a silent promise of safety. "You're here now," she said to James, her voice firm. They didn't win, but her mind raced. A CEO betrayed by his wife and best friend, left to die in the wilderness? It was a story ripped from headlines, yet here it was, bleeding out in her shed. She glanced at Lily, whose wide eyes begged for reassurance. "Go check the water, sweetheart," Sarah said, buying time to process the weight of James's words. Lily nodded, scurrying to the small stove where a pot simmered. Sarah turned back to James, her nurse's instincts kicking in. She checked his pulse. Stronger now, but still erratic. "You need rest," she said, pulling the thermal blanket higher. "But we need to know more. Who's Ethan?" The name had slipped from his lips earlier, heavy with longing. James's face softened, a flicker of warmth breaking through the pain. "My son," he whispered. "He's 10. I promised him we'd build a drone together. I never got to say goodbye." Sarah's throat tightened. She knew that kind of promise. The ones you make to a child. The ones that keep you going. "You'll see him again," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. "We'll make sure of it." James's eyes glistened, a tear slipping down his cheek. "You don't even know me," he said, his voice breaking. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah hesitated, her losses surfacing, her husband's slow fade to cancer. The nights she'd held him, helpless. "Because no one should be left alone," she said finally. "Not like that." Lily returned, holding a steaming mug of herbal tea Sarah had made from their camping supplies. "For him," she said shyly, offering it to Sarah. James took a sip, wincing as the warmth hit his throat, but he nodded in gratitude. "You're brave, Lily," he said, his voice steadier. The girl beamed, a spark of pride cutting through her fear. Sarah watched them, her heart aching with a strange mix of dread and purpose. She'd saved James's life, but his story was a tangled web of betrayal, and she'd just stepped into its center. Outside, the mountains stood silent, their shadows swallowing the last of the light. Sarah knew they couldn't stay here forever. No signal, no help, just the three of them in a shed that felt smaller by the minute. James's breathing evened out, his eyes closing as exhaustion pulled him under. Sarah tucked the blanket around him, her mind already racing toward what came next. Clara and Marcus thought they'd buried him, but they hadn't counted on her. She looked at Lily, asleep now against the ropes, and felt a fire ignite. This wasn't just about saving a man. It was about unearthing a truth someone had killed to keep hidden. The lantern's dim glow wavered, casting jagged shadows that danced like ghosts across the shed's cluttered walls. Sarah sat cross-legged on the cold floor, her hands stained with antiseptic and earth, watching James's chest rise and fall under the thermal blanket. His words, Clara, Marcus, Ethan, echoed in her mind, each one a piece of a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to solve. Lily slept nearby, her small form curled against a pile of old climbing ropes, her soft breaths a fragile anchor in the tense silence. The wind outside had softened to a low moan, but it carried a chill that seeped through the shed's cracks, reminding Sarah of their isolation. She checked her phone again. No signal, no way to call for help. They were alone with a man whose life hung by a thread in a story that burned with betrayal. James stirred, his eyelids fluttering as he fought his way back to consciousness. His face, still pale but less deathly, twitched with the effort of waking. Sarah leaned forward, her voice low. "James, can you hear me?" His blue eyes opened, clearer now, though pain lingered in their depths. He nodded faintly, his lips parting as if to speak, then closed again, exhaustion battling his will. Sarah handed him the mug of herbal tea Lily had prepared, its steam curling in the cold air. "Drink slowly," she said, steadying his trembling hands. He sipped, wincing, but the warmth seemed to ground him. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice stronger but still raw. "For everything." Sarah shook her head, brushing off the gratitude. "You'd do the same," she said, though she wasn't sure he would. Men like him, CEOs, power players, lived in a world far from hers, a single mother scraping by in a rented trailer. Yet here he was, broken and human, his life in her hands. "Tell me more," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "About Clara and Marcus. What did they do?" She needed to understand the danger they'd pulled him from. and whether it might follow them here. James's gaze drifted to the lantern, its flickering light reflecting the storm in his eyes. MedConnect was my life's work, he began, his voice steadying as memory sharpened his words. We built apps to get doctors to remote areas, clinics, telemedicine, real impact. Clara was my partner in every sense. Elegant, brilliant, the one who charmed investors. Marcus was my best friend since college, the numbers guy. I trusted him with everything. He paused, his fingers tightening around the mug. But I was blind. They were siphoning money, millions, into offshore accounts. Fake contracts, forged signatures. They used my name to steal my company. Sarah's breath caught, her nurse's hand stilling. She'd seen greed in small ways. Landlords hiking rent, bosses cutting corners. But this was a calculated cruelty. How did you find out? She asked, leaning closer. James's jaw tightened, a flash of anger cutting through his fatigue. I came home early from a conference, heard them in my study, laughing, whispering. I walked in, saw them, together. Not just an affair, but a plan. Clara wanted the estate, Marcus wanted the company. They admitted it, bold as brass, like I was already gone. His voice cracked, and he looked away, shame and fury warring in his expression. Lily stirred, her small voice breaking the tension. "Mom, is he okay?" she whispered, rubbing her eyes. Sarah reached for her, pulling her close. "He's talking, sweetheart. That's a good sign." She kissed Lily's forehead, her heart aching at the fear in her daughter's eyes. "Go check the stove, okay? Keep the water warm." Lily nodded, slipping away, her small steps a quiet act of courage. Sarah turned back to James, her resolve hardening. "They tried to kill you," she said, not a question but a fact. "Why the mountain?" James's laugh was bitter, barely a sound. "It was perfect. They knew I loved hiking, called it my escape. They planned a birthday trip, just the three of us. Said it was a gift. Halfway up, Marcus, he hit me with a rock. I woke up in that pit, hands tied, leaves over me like a shroud. They staged it, a lost hiker, a tragic accident. Clara's probably already told the press I'm missing." His eyes met Sarah's, glistening with unshed tears. "But Ethan, my son, he's why I kept breathing. I promised him a drone, a stupid little project, but it was everything to him." Sarah's chest tightened. She knew those promises, the ones that tethered you to life. "You'll keep that promise," she said fiercely. "We'll get you to Ethan." James looked at her, disbelief softening into something like hope. "You're risking too much," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know what they're capable of." Sarah shook her head, her blonde hair catching the lantern's glow. "I know what it's like to lose someone," she said, her voice thick with memory. "My husband. Cancer took him fast. I won't let Ethan lose you, too." Lily returned, carrying a fresh cloth, her small face set with determination. "For his head," she said, handing it to Sarah. James managed a weak smile. "You're a brave kid, Lily," he said, his voice warm despite his pain. The girl beamed, her fear easing under his words. Sarah pressed the cloth to his forehead, her mind racing. Clara and Marcus thought they'd bury James, but they hadn't counted on her or Lily. The shed, with its creaking walls and musty air, was no longer just a shelter. It was a battleground, and Sarah was ready to fight. The shed's lantern cast a stubborn glow, its light clawing back the darkness that pressed against the walls. Sarah sat on a rickety stool, her hands busy with a needle and thread, stitching a tear in James's tattered jacket. The rhythmic motion steadied her racing thoughts, though each word of his story, Clara's betrayal, Marcus's violence, Ethan's waiting heart, tightened the knot in her chest. Lily, curled on a blanket near the cot, clutched a flashlight, its beam flickering as she dozed, her small snores a fragile counterpoint to the wind's restless murmur outside. James lay propped against a pile of old cushions, his breathing steadier, though his face still bore the pallor of someone who'd stared death in the eye. The mug of herbal tea sat empty beside him, its faint scent of yarrow lingering in the air. Sarah glanced at him, her needle pausing. His eyes, clearer now, held a restless intensity, as if piecing together fragments of his shattered life. "You're looking better," she said, her voice soft but probing. "Strong enough to tell me more?" James nodded, his jaw tightening. "I owe you that much," he said, his voice low but firm. "Clara and Marcus, they didn't just want me gone. They wanted it all. MedConnect, the estate, my legacy. They'd been planning for months, maybe years." He touched the bandage on his forehead, wincing. "I found a paper trail, transfers I never signed, accounts I didn't know existed. I confronted them. That's when they decided I was a liability." Sarah's hands stilled, the needle glinting in the lantern's light. She'd seen desperation in her old life, patience fighting for one more day, families clinging to hope, but this was a calculated malice that chilled her. "They thought they could erase you," she said, her voice sharp with disgust, "bury you and walk away." James's laugh was bitter, a sound that cut through the shed's quiet. "They almost did. Clara's clever. She's been spinning stories for the press for years. By now she's probably told the world I'm on a sabbatical, lost in the wilderness." Lily stirred, her flashlight rolling across the blanket. "Mom," she mumbled, half asleep. "Is he safe now?" Sarah reached over, tucking the blanket around her daughter. "He's with us, sweetheart," she said, her voice a promise. She turned back to James, her eyes narrowing. "We need a plan. If Clara and Marcus think you're dead, they're not expecting you to fight back. That's our advantage." James looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "You're already in too deep," he said. "This could get dangerous." "Dangerous was leaving you in that pit," Sarah shot back, her voice fierce. "I'm not walking away now." She set the jacket aside, its stitches neat despite her trembling hands. Her mind raced, piecing together their next steps. Her phone, useless without signal, couldn't help yet, but she'd packed a small notebook in her hiking gear. She pulled it out, flipping to a blank page. "Tell me everything you remember," she said. "Names, dates, anything we can use." James nodded, his eyes sharpening with purpose. "There's Rachel," he said. "My old financial officer. She's loyal, or was. If anyone knows where the money went, it's her." Sarah scribbled the name, her pen scratching in the quiet. "How do we reach her?" she asked. James hesitated, his fingers tracing the abrasions on his wrists. "She's on LinkedIn. I can give you my login, but we'd need a signal." Sarah frowned, glancing at the shed's door. The nearest ranger station was a half-day's hike, too far to risk leaving James alone. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice steady despite the odds. "What else?" James's voice dropped, almost a whisper. "There's a safe in my office. Documents, contracts, emails. If we can get those, we'd have proof." Lily woke fully now, her green eyes bright with curiosity. "Like detectives?" she asked, scooting closer. James managed a weak smile, his face softening. "Exactly, kiddo. You're already braver than most." Lily beamed, clutching her flashlight like a badge of honor. Sarah's heart swelled, but worry gnawed at her. She was pulling her daughter into a world of secrets and lies, yet Lily's courage fueled her own. "We'll start small," Sarah said, her pen tapping the notebook. "Tomorrow I'll hike to the ridge for a signal. We'll contact Rachel, see what she knows." James's eyes met hers, gratitude mingling with fear. "You're risking everything for a stranger," he said, his voice thick. Sarah thought of her husband, of the nights she'd held his hand as cancer stole him away. "You're not a stranger anymore," she said quietly. "You're someone's father. That's enough for me." She glanced at Lily, who was drawing absently in the notebook's margin, a stick figure family under a tree. The sight tightened Sarah's resolve. She wasn't just saving James. She was teaching her daughter what it meant to stand up. The lantern flickered, its light wavering as if sensing the weight of their task. Sarah tucked the notebook away, her mind already mapping the trail to the ridge. Clara and Marcus had buried a man, but they hadn't buried the truth. She'd dig it up piece by piece, no matter the cost. As James drifted back to sleep, his hand clutching the blanket like a lifeline, Sarah leaned close to Lily. "We're doing the right thing," she whispered. Lily nodded, her small hand finding hers. In the shed's fragile warmth, surrounded by shadows and secrets, a spark of defiance burned bright. Dawn broke over the blue ridge, its pale light seeping through the shed's cracked walls, painting faint stripes across James's sleeping form. Sarah stood by the door, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her blonde hair tucked under a worn cap. The notebook, filled with James's fragmented truths, was tucked safely in her pack, alongside a water bottle and Lily's favorite granola bar. Lily sat on the floor, her small hands braiding a piece of rope, her green eyes shadowed with worry. "You'll be back before dark, right, Mom?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Sarah knelt, cupping her daughter's face. "I promise, sweetheart. You stay with James. Keep him talking. You're braver than you know." Lily nodded, clutching the rope like a talisman. Sarah glanced at James, his breathing steadier now, though his face still carried the weight of his ordeal. "I'll find a signal," she said, her voice firm. "We'll reach Rachel." James stirred, his blue eyes meeting hers, gratitude flickering beneath his exhaustion. "Be careful," he murmured. "Clara, she's ruthless." Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd faced her battles, grief, poverty, the endless grind of single motherhood, but this was a new kind of fight. "They don't know we're coming," she said, a spark of defiance in her tone. "That's our edge." She stepped into the morning chill, the trail stretching before her like a gauntlet. The ridge where cell service flickered was a 2-hour hike, steep and unforgiving. Her boots crunched against frost-kissed stones, the air sharp with pine and earth. Every step carried the weight of James's story. Clara's betrayal, Marcus's violence, Ethan's waiting heart. Sarah's mind churned, mapping out the message she'd send to Rachel. She had James's LinkedIn login scrawled in her notebook, but trust was a gamble. If Rachel was loyal, they'd have a lifeline. If not, Sarah was exposing them all. Back in the shed, James sat up, wincing as he shifted on the cot. Lily hovered nearby, offering him a cracked mug of lukewarm tea. "You're awake," she said, her voice bright despite the dimness. James managed a smile, his gaunt face softening. "Thanks to you, kiddo," he said, taking the mug. "You're keeping me going." Lily beamed, sitting cross-legged beside him. "Mom says you have a son. What's he like?" James's eyes glistened, a flicker of warmth breaking through his pain. "Ethan's curious, like you. Loves building things. Drones, robots. I promised I'd teach him coding." His voice cracked and he looked away, fingers tracing the bandage on his wrist. Lily tilted her head, her braids swinging. "You'll see him again," she said, her child's certainty cutting through the gloom. "Mom always keeps her promises." James chuckled, a sound both bitter and fond. "Your mom's one of a kind," he said. "I was buried, Lily. Thought I'd never see light again. But you both pulled me out." Lily's face lit up, and she handed him a small drawing from her pocket. A stick figure family under a tree, like the one she'd sketched in Sarah's notebook. "For you," she said shyly. James took it, his throat tightening. "You're a good kid," he whispered, tucking the drawing into his torn jacket. On the ridge, Sarah's breath came in sharp bursts as she reached the summit. The wind whipped her face, carrying the scent of distant snow. She pulled out her phone, her fingers stiff with cold, and watched the screen flicker. 1 bar, then 2. Her heart leapt. She logged into James's LinkedIn, crafting a message to Rachel. "This is a friend of James Carver. He's alive. Need your help with MedConnect records. Can you meet us?" She hesitated, then hit send, the message vanishing into the ether. She waited, the silence of the mountains pressing against her. Minutes later, a reply pinged. "James? My God, where are you? I'll help. Name the place." Sarah's pulse raced, hope, but laced with doubt. Was Rachel an ally or another trap? She pocketed the phone, her mind already racing toward the next step. The safe James mentioned in his office held proof. Contracts, emails, evidence of Clara and Marcus's theft. Getting there would be risky, but staying hidden was no longer enough. Sarah started down the trail, her boots slipping on loose gravel, her resolve hardening with every step. Clara and Marcus thought they'd buried James, but they'd underestimated the woman who'd found him. She wasn't just a mother or a nurse. She was a force, and she'd tear through their lies to set him free. Back in the shed, James folded Lily's drawing, his fingers lingering on the paper. "Tell me about you," he said, his voice gentle. Lily grinned, launching into a story about her school's science fair, her words tumbling like a stream. James listened, his pain easing as her voice filled the space. For the first time since the pit, he felt something like hope, not just for himself, but for Ethan, for a future he might still reclaim. The shed's walls seemed less confining, the lantern's light a little brighter. Sarah was out there fighting for him, and Lily was here, anchoring him. He wasn't alone anymore. Sarah's silhouette appeared in the doorway, her face flushed from the hike. "I reached Rachel," she said, breathless. "She's in." James sat up, hope and fear colliding in his chest. "You're sure we can trust her?" he asked. Sarah nodded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "We'll find out," she said, dropping her pack. "But we're not waiting for them to find us." Lily looked up, her drawing now pinned to the shed's wall. "Like detectives?" she asked, echoing her words from before. Sarah smiled, fierce and unshakable. "Exactly, sweetheart. We're digging up the truth." The shed's lantern burned low, its flame a fragile pulse against the creeping chill of night. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, her notebook open, its pages filled with hurried notes from her ridgetop exchange with Rachel. James leaned against the cot's edge, his strength returning in small, stubborn increments, though his eyes still carried the weight of a man who'd seen his world collapse. Lily, nestled in a nest of blankets, clutched her flashlight, its beam tracing idle patterns on the wall where her stick figure drawing hung, a silent reminder of the family they were fighting for. The air was thick with the scent of herbal tea and resolve, each breath a step toward a reckoning none of them could fully predict. Sarah's pen tapped the notebook, her mind racing through Rachel's message. "She's agreed to meet," she said, her voice steady but laced with caution. "Tomorrow, at a diner in Asheville. Neutral ground." James nodded, his fingers tracing the bandage on his wrist. The abrasions a constant reminder of his betrayal. "Rachel's sharp," he said. "She handled MedConnect's accounts for years. If anyone can find the paper trail, it's her. But—" His voice trailed off, doubt clouding his gaze. "Clara and Marcus got to everyone else. What if they got to her?" Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd learned to read people. Patients hiding pain, bosses dodging truth. And Rachel's quick reply felt genuine. But trust was a luxury they couldn't afford. "We'll be careful," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I'll go alone. Keep you and Lily out of sight." James shook his head, his voice firm despite his weakness. "You're already risking too much. I can't let you walk into this blind." Sarah's lips curved, a spark of defiance in her smile. "I'm not blind, James. I'm a mother. I see everything." Lily stirred, her flashlight beam swinging toward them. "Are we catching the bad guys?" she asked, her voice sleepy but eager. Sarah reached over, smoothing her daughter's braid. "We're starting to, sweetheart," she said, her tone soft but resolute. "Go back to sleep." Lily yawned, curling tighter into her blankets, but her question lingered, a child's hope fueling their resolve. Sarah turned back to James, her pen poised. "Tell me about the safe in your office. What's in it?" James's eyes sharpened, memory cutting through his fatigue. Contracts, emails, a USB drive with backups, proof of every deal Clara and Marcus faked. If we get those, we can bury them. Sarah scribbled, her mind mapping the logistics. Asheville was a 3-hour hike, then a bus ride. She'd need to leave at dawn, leaving James and Lily in the shed. The risk gnawed at her. Clara and Marcus could be searching, their plan unraveling as rumors of James's survival spread. "We need more than Rachel," she said, her voice low. "Something to shake them." James's brow furrowed, then his eyes lit with a sudden idea. "A message," he said. "Something public, anonymous. Plant a seed. Make them think I'm alive." Sarah's pulse quickened. She'd seen online forums during her nursing shifts, places where whispers became wildfires. "A post," she said, nodding. "Something vague, enough to rattle them." She grabbed her phone, still charged from the ridge, and opened a browser. Tech forums. Clara and Marcus would watch those. "What do we say?" James leaned forward, his voice steady now. Something like, "James Carver's not gone. MedConnect's secrets are coming." Short, cryptic. "Let them panic. Sarah typed, her fingers swift, posting to a niche tech board under a burner account. She hit send, the words vanishing into the digital void. The shed's silence felt heavier now, the weight of their gamble settling in. James looked at Sarah, his gratitude laced with fear. "You're putting everything on the line," he said, his voice thick. "Why?" Sarah's gaze drifted to Lily, her daughter's small form a beacon in the dark. "I lost my husband to cancer," she said quietly. "I watched him fade, held his hand till the end. I promised myself no one else would face that kind of loneliness. Not if I could help it." Her eyes met James's, fierce with conviction. "You're fighting for Ethan. I'm fighting for you." James's throat bobbed, emotion raw in his eyes. "Ethan? He's all I have left," he said, his voice breaking. "I was going to teach him coding, show him the stars through a drone's camera. I can't lose that." Sarah reached out, her hand brushing his. "You won't," she said, her voice a vow. "We'll get you back to him," Lily murmured in her sleep, her flashlight rolling across the blanket, and James's gaze softened. "She's like you," he said, "stronger than she knows." Sarah smiled, her heart aching with pride and fear. "She's my reason," she said simply. The lantern flickered, its light wavering as the night deepened. Sarah tucked her notebook away, her mind already on the diner meeting. Rachel was their first step, but Clara and Marcus were out there, their web of lies still intact. The anonymous post was a spark, one she hoped would ignite their fear. She glanced at James, his face set with a new determination, and at Lily, her small hand clutching the flashlight like a sword. They were a team now, bound by a shared fight. The shed, once a refuge, was becoming a war room, and Sarah felt the fire of purpose burning brighter. Clara and Marcus had buried a man, but they'd awakened a mother's wrath, and that was a force they couldn't outrun. The morning sun sliced through the Blue Ridge's mist, its light barely warming the trail as Sarah trekked toward Asheville. Her boots thudded against the rocky path, her backpack light, but her heart heavy with the weight of their plan. The anonymous post she'd sent last night hummed in her mind, a spark now smoldering in the digital world, waiting to catch fire. Back in the shed, James and Lily were hidden, safe for now, but every step Sarah took felt like a gamble against time. Clara and Marcus's betrayal loomed larger with each revelation, and Rachel, their potential ally, was a question mark Sarah couldn't afford to misread. Her phone, tucked in her pocket, held Rachel's reply, a promise to meet at a diner, but trust was a fragile thread. In the shed, James sat upright, his strength returning like a tide. Lily knelt beside him, her small hands carefully rebandaging his wrist, her green eyes focused. "Does it hurt?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. James shook his head, managing a smile. "Not as much as yesterday, thanks to you," he said, his tone warm. "You'd make a good nurse, like your mom." Lily beamed, her braids swinging as she tied off the bandage. "Mom says we're detectives now," she said, her voice bright with pride. James's gaze softened, his thoughts drifting to Ethan. "You're both more than that," he said quietly. "You're my lifeline." Sarah reached the diner by noon, its neon sign flickering above a weathered facade. The air inside was thick with the scent of coffee and fried bacon, the hum of conversation a stark contrast to the shed's tense quiet. She slid into a corner booth, her cap pulled low, scanning the room for Rachel. A woman entered, mid-40s, dark hair, sharp eyes, carrying a laptop bag. "Sarah?" she asked, her voice low, cautious. Sarah nodded, gesturing to the seat across from her. Rachel sat, her fingers tapping nervously. "I couldn't believe it when I got your message," she said, her voice trembling. "James is alive?" Sarah leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's hurt, but he's fighting. We need your help, Rachel. The accounts, Clara and Marcus's transfers. Can you get proof?" Rachel's eyes widened, but she nodded, pulling out her laptop. "I've seen things," she said, her fingers flying across the keys. "Offshore accounts, Cayman shells, signatures that looked too perfect. I kept copies just in case." She slid a USB drive across the table, her hand shaking. "Bank statements, emails, forged contracts. It's all here." Sarah's pulse quickened as she pocketed the drive, its weight a promise of justice. Why didn't you go to the police? She asked, studying Rachel's face. The woman's jaw tightened. I was scared. Clara's got connections, press, lawyers, even cops. I didn't know who to trust until you reached out. Sarah nodded, her instincts telling her Rachel was genuine, but doubt lingered. We're setting a trap, she said. That post online, it's already rattling them. Can you get more? Something undeniable? Rachel hesitated, then nodded. There's an audit trail. I can access it remotely, but it'll take time. Back in the shed, James pored over Sarah's notebook, his fingers tracing her hurried scrawl. Lily sat beside him, drawing a new sketch, a drone soaring over mountains. For Ethan, she said, handing it to him. James's throat tightened, his eyes glistening. He'd love this, he said, his voice thick. You know, I promised him we'd fly one together, watch the stars through its camera. Lily tilted her head, her voice earnest. You will. Mom's gonna make sure. James chuckled, the sound raw but real. Your mom's a force of nature, he said, tucking the drawing beside her first one. Sarah's return brought a rush of energy to the shed. She dropped her pack, her face flushed with purpose. Rachel's in, she said, holding up the USB drive. Bank records, emails, enough to start building a case. James's eyes lit up, a spark of hope cutting through his pain. You're sure she's clean? He asked, his voice cautious. Sarah nodded, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. She's scared, but she's on our side. The post worked. Clara and Marcus are spooked. Rachel saw panicked emails between them. She opened her phone, showing a screenshot from the form, replies piling up. Carver alive? MedConnect's dirty. The seed was sprouting. We need to move fast, Sarah said, her voice steady. Rachel's digging for more, but we need that safe in your office. James nodded, his strength bolstered by her resolve. It's in Asheville, hidden behind a panel. I can guide you. Sarah shook her head. You're not ready. I'll go. Lily looked up, her pencil pausing. Mom, what if they find you? She asked, her voice small. Sarah knelt, pulling her close. They won't, sweetheart. I'm too stubborn. Lily giggled, but her eyes held fear. James reached for Sarah's hand, his grip weak but earnest. You're risking your life for mine, he said, his voice raw. I don't deserve this. Sarah's gaze softened, her thoughts flashing to her husband's final days, the promises she'd kept. No one deserves to be buried alive, she said. We're getting you back to Ethan. The shed's walls seemed to close in, the lanterns light a defiant glow against the gathering storm. Sarah's plan was taking shape, but Clara and Marcus were out there, their lies unraveling. She looked at Lily's drawings, pinned like battle flags, and felt a fire ignite. They weren't just fighting for James. They were fighting for truth, and no one would bury it again. The shed's lantern had burned out, leaving only the dawn's pale glow to illuminate the cramped space. Sarah sat by the cot, her notebook now a war map of scribbled plans and Rachel's damning evidence. The USB drive, heavy in her pocket, held the key to unraveling Clara and Marcus's empire of lies. James stood for the first time in days, his steps shaky but resolute, his eyes burning with a fire Sarah hadn't seen before. Lily, perched on a crate, clutched her latest drawing, a drone soaring above a family of 4. Her green eyes flickered with hope, but worry lingered as she watched her mother prepare for the final move. The anonymous post had done its work, stirring a frenzy online, and Rachel's audit trail was nearly complete. Now the battlefield was shifting to Asheville, to James's office, where the safe held their victory. Sarah zipped her jacket, her face set with determination. I'm going for the safe, she said, her voice steady despite the pulse pounding in her ears. Rachel's meeting me there with the final records. James gripped the cot's edge, his voice firm. I'm coming with you. This ends now. Sarah shook her head, her blonde hair catching the morning light. You're not strong enough. Stay with Lily. But James's eyes blazed, unyielding. They took my life, Sarah. I need to take it back. Lily tugged her mother's sleeve, her voice small but fierce. Let him, Mom. He's ready. Sarah hesitated, then nodded, her trust in them both outweighing her fear. The bus to Asheville rattled along, its seats worn and creaking. Sarah sat beside James, his borrowed jacket hiding the bandages beneath. Lily leaned against her, sketching in the notebook, her pencil scratching softly. Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. Audit complete. Found forged signatures dated after James's disappearance. Meet me at MedConnect, back entrance. Sarah showed it to James, whose jaw tightened. They thought they'd won, he said, his voice low. They didn't count on you. Sarah's lips curved, a spark of defiance in her eyes. Or us, she said, squeezing Lily's hand. The girl looked up, her smile a beacon in the tension. At MedConnect's sleek office, the back entrance was shadowed, untouched by the morning bustle. Rachel waited, her laptop bag clutched tight, her face pale but resolute. It's all here, she said, handing Sarah a second USB drive. Emails, transfers, even a recorded call, where Clara admits staging your death. James took it, his hand trembling, not with weakness but rage. The safe's in my office behind a panel, he said, leading them inside. The building was quiet. Most staff at a conference Clara and Marcus were headlining across town. Sarah's heart raced as they slipped through empty halls, Lily's small hand in hers, her flashlight tucked in her pocket like a talisman. The safe's panel yielded under James's touch, revealing a steel door. He punched in the code, his fingers steady despite the stakes. Inside were files, a USB drive, and a handwritten note. Ethan's scrawl, a reminder of a drone project. James's breath hitched, but he handed the documents to Sarah. Everything we need, he said, his voice thick. Rachel uploaded the audit trail to a secure server, her hands shaking. This goes to the DA now, she said. Clara and Marcus are done. But Sarah's eyes narrowed. Not yet, she said. They need to see him. The conference hall buzzed with cameras and chatter, Clara and Marcus at the podium, spinning tales of MedConnect's future. Sarah, James, and Lily slipped in through a side door, Rachel trailing with her laptop. James, his face still bruised but unbowed, stepped into the light as Clara's speech faltered. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice cutting through the crowd like a blade. I'm James Carver, and I'm not dead. Gas rippled through the room as he held up the USB drive. Clara Carver and Marcus Reed buried me alive to steal this company. Here's the proof. Rachel projected the evidence. Forged signatures, emails, Clara's recorded voice. Once he's gone, it's ours. Clara's face drained of color, her diamond earrings glinting as she stumbled back. Marcus reached for his phone, but police were already moving in, badges flashing. You're under arrest, an officer said, cuffing them as the crowd erupted. James stood tall, his eyes locked on Sarah, who nodded from the back, Lily clinging to her side. The truth had shattered their lies, and justice was closing in. A week later, under a quiet Asheville sky, Sarah and Lily stood with James at a park near Ethan's school. The boy, his brown hair tousled, ran toward his father, his cry of "Dad," breaking the morning's calm. James knelt, enveloping him in a fierce embrace, tears streaming. I'm here, Ethan, he whispered. I kept my promise. Sarah turned away, her eyes wet, as Lily squeezed her hand. We did it, Mom, she said, her voice bright. James looked at Sarah, his gratitude boundless. You gave me my son back, he said, his voice raw. You gave me everything. They moved to a small house near the mountains, a place of ivy and sunlight. James left MedConnect, starting a foundation to help betrayed families, with Sarah and Lily by his side. Each night they ate together, laughed, and built drones under the stars. The shed's shadows were gone, replaced by a light that no betrayal could dim. Sarah looked at her new family, James, Ethan, Lily, and knew they'd unearthed more than truth. They'd found home. In the quiet glow of a mountain evening, Sarah, James, Lily, and Ethan found a home not just in their ivy-clad house, but in the bonds forged through courage and compassion. Sarah's unwavering resolve, sparked by a hand reaching from the earth, unearthed more than James's life. It revealed the strength of a mother's heart and a child's fearless hope. Lily's drawings, once pinned in a dusty shed, now adorn their walls, symbols of a family built not by blood, but by choice. James, once buried by betrayal, rose to reclaim his son, Ethan, their laughter under the stars a testament to promises kept. Clara and Marcus's lies crumbled, but the true victory was the light Sarah kindled, a light that no darkness could extinguish. This story of resilience, of a single mother and her daughter defying a world of secrets is more than a tale. It's a call to see the power in kindness, the strength in standing up. What did this journey stir in you? Did Sarah's courage spark a memory, or did Lily's bravery remind you of your own? Share your thoughts below. Tell us where you're listening from, what moment hit hardest, or how this story moved you. Your voice matters, just as Sarah's did in that shadowed pit. We're grateful for you, for joining us in this tale of redemption and hope. Your support, through a like, a share, or a subscription, keeps these stories alive. Until we meet again, under new stars and new stories, keep your heart open and your courage close. What light will you kindle in the dark? Share it, and let's meet again soon.